Welcome, everyone. I'm Penny Lewis, the Executive Director of the Ecological Landscape Alliance, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, The Green Industry's Black Thumb, Pollution from Our Use of Disposable Plastic Plant Pots. This is part of the Focus on Sustainability webinar series developed by a group of organizations known for their quality ecological education. In case you're not familiar with our organizations, they are largely nonprofit and volunteer groups in the United States. The groups are the Ecological Landscape Alliance, the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council, Deep Roots Kansas City, Rescape California, and the American Public Gardens Association. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Marie Chieppo. Marie is a gardener and landscape designer with 22 years of experience designing ecologically sound landscapes. Before Marie discovered her gardening passion, she was the researcher for the editor-in-chief at the New England Journal of Medicine. Marie is a member of the Association of Professional Landscape Designers, and it was through her work on APLD's Sustainability Committee that Marie was asked to research the issue of plastic horticultural pots. We're pleased that she's with us today to share some of her jaw-dropping discoveries and some options for the future. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much, Penny, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Good changes on the way. Hopefully one of them is a movement away from plastic pots to products that are kinder to our environment. And I just want to mention, as this little blurb on the bottom states, I am not endorsing any products that I mention in this presentation. I am solely mentioning them for informational purposes. As you see from today's talk title is the Green Industry's Black Thumb, Pollution from Our Use and Disposal of Black Plant Pots. And it occurred to me when I was putting this presentation together that pollution isn't just in terms of what we typically think of as pollution, but perhaps also pollution in the sense of our mindsets, what we've been sort of sold as being what is acceptable to our environment. And as Penny mentioned also, I did write a paper for the Association of Professional Landscape Designers entitled Plastic Pots in the Green Industry, Production, Use, Disposal, and Environmental Impacts. It came out in July of 2020, and we have since had a great response to this. The impetus behind this paper is the Plastic Pots initiative that was started back in 1998 at the Missouri Botanical Garden. At our webinar in July, Jean Ponzi, the Green Resources Manager, presented their garden plastics recycling program that was known as Pots to Planks. The grind was used to manufacture plastic timber and ultimately raised bed kits, which was sort of the selling point to a lot of the consumers there, thinking that I'll drop my pot off here to be disposed of properly, and it's actually going to be turned into something that is usable. They met the need of area residents for a place to discard the hort plastics, and between 2003 and 2008, they processed 250,000 pounds of used pots and trays. To increase their grinding capacity with grants, they purchased equipment. Satellite stations for drop-offs were established. Then demand was so high that a recycling company ended up taking over the grinding material in 2017. We came into play, meaning APLD, when our interest was piqued by the efforts being made at the garden. And between the garden and the Sustainability Committee, we really wanted to get into the meat of this and find out why. Why is this such a problem? I know I'm speaking to the choir when I bring up the issue of piles of plastic refuse left over from completed landscape jobs, When I was asked to look into why it's so difficult to dispose of them properly, I honestly didn't know it was such a huge problem. I think, as many of you, I disposed them what I thought was a responsible way, bringing them to my transfer station, to the nursery, to the wholesaler, for them to process them and be taken care of responsibly. And what I found after I started digging was, as Penny said, jaw-dropping. I started reading articles from professional journals and newspapers, magazines, talking to people. Then I had the absolute real oh no moment when I realized, or I was reading, I should say, how many of these are not being recycled. The quantity of these that are ending up in landfills was mind-boggling. So I kind of decided, you know, I know people in this field, I'm going to start looking around and talking to people and seeing what I can find out. And the production manager at a major nursery that I get a vast amount of my material from literally said to me, we go through hundreds of thousands of pots. They do the best they can with them, or what they're supposed to do. And when I asked him if he had any sense of what happens to them after they are retrieved, he said he didn't know, which doesn't surprise me. In blind faith, we have them, you know, taken away and believe that, again, they're being recycled and processed properly. So I then started trying to ask myself, okay, plastic is a wonderful material. We use it for basically everything. It's just omnipresent in our lives, even much more than we think we know. And it's flexible. It's a great material for that. It's inexpensive. It comes in various sizes and shapes. It doesn't break. It's easy to transport. And the integrity of the product is really well maintained. In the earlier years, before plastic, the primary vessel for plants were metal cans and clay or ceramic, which for obvious reasons aren't as user-friendly as plastic. So then after I started researching, I thought, wow, we really love this stuff, because in terms of production, it has just gone through the roof. In 2000, between 1950 and 2015, global plastic production increased from 2 million tons to over 400 million tons. And I guarantee you it's even much more now. Half of the plastic that we have on Earth currently has been with us since 2005. That's half. So the EPA puts out recycling or data about disposal of material every year. And in 2018, 35,600 million tons of plastic was generated. And if you look at the graph here, you'll see this is the amount that is landfilled. This is the amount that was combusted with energy. And this is the amount that was recycled. It's quite amazing. The EPA has the approach to reducing waste is on par with what I think most of us feel is the best approach, which is source reduction and reuse, recycling, composting, energy recovery, and treatment of disposal. However, plastic really doesn't fall much into this chart or this graphic very, very well. So another impetus behind the amount of plastic that has been produced are the oil companies, that provide cheap, accessible, clean plastic to manufacturers. As a result, not just because of what the oil companies are doing, but because recycled plastic just in the market doesn't hold value that it used to. So there's no demand in the marketplace, and the majority of municipalities anywhere is having to pay to have plastic removed. In terms of how it's produced, approximately 10% of recycled plastic is made into plastic, and 90%, again, is used from virgin feedstocks or fossil fuels. These are the types of plastics that are typically used in horticulture. I'm not going to go through the entire chart, but the numbers 2, 4, 5, and 6 are the typical resins or plastics used. A lot of the big plastic pots that we use are made of the HDPE, the high density polyethylene, and the low density typically is used for greenhouse covers. Polypropylene is what small nursery pots and other materials are made of. This is not, you know, the only list of items that they are made into for horticulture. And then the high impact polystyrene is where you find your flats and trays, that very sort of weak plastic that breaks easily is used out of that. So again, why is plastic so difficult to recycle? Recyclable does not mean it is recycled. And that was something, again, that took time to sink in, but it began to make sense if you think about it. The little logo with the arrows that you see at the bottom of plastic products is the resin type. It's the plastic type. Going back to the numbers that I showed you here, you will see at the bottom, in this case of pots, this is the number 5. But again, it doesn't mean that it's recycled. The reason that plastics have these codes is that each plastic melts at a different temperature. And when they are collected and sorted, they need to be done in such a way that it doesn't literally mess up the recycling machinery. And so it's a more efficient way of recycling the plastic as well. Also, every plastic needs to be cleaned. Pots obviously have soil, fertilizers, pesticides in them. They all must be decontaminated. And if you think about the plastics that we throw into our dumpsters, when I go to my dump, my eyes go in 12 different directions because I'm just in awe of the types of plastics that are in these mixed collections of plastic piles. There's a lot of work somebody's doing to have these dealt with and/or they're landfilled. Another issue that came into play, creating hurdles for us in handling our plastic, was China no longer in 2017, their national sword policy stopped taking a lot of our waste imports, plastic being one of them. And currently, we don't have the infrastructure in place to handle the amount of plastic that we have. We do export some to other countries. Unfortunately, these are poor countries. And people are sort of forced to work through plastic. But we also, as a result, have a limited access to facilities because there just aren't enough of them. And all plastics are not created equal. And like other materials such as glass or metal that can be recycled multiple times, there's a long chain of molecules that composes plastic, and most of it can only be recycled once or twice. This is not a long-lasting material. In the 1970s, and I actually picked this up from the Plastic Wars presentation that was done from Frontline, it was known that large-scale mixed dirty plastics couldn't be recycled. And again, I think back to us dumping all our plastics into our recycling bins, not, you know, with the label on the bottom saying, well, this means it can be, this is recycled. Well, it actually means it's the resin type. And we just do not have the infrastructure in place to handle it or the equipment. So getting to our pots, I started thinking about, for example, you know, somebody has an installation, and in one installation, you may have a combination of 200 mixed containers. All of these issues that are surrounding the 200 mixed containers come into play. Again, they all need to be cleaned, which is for a landscaper, for installer, whomever, is time consuming and expensive, as is the collection as well, because you again have a variety of plastic types, shapes and sizes. These resin codes that I have been talking about are difficult to find and to read. And transportation, whether it's your company or sending it off via another company, costs money. And that's an additional cost. And then of course we have the black plastic pots that, unbeknownst to me before all of this started, are not recyclable. Why? Well, it's composed, again, of different plastics. And as I said, the codes at the bottom indicate what type of plastic it is and where it should go in the recycling channel. A pot or material that is made of mixed plastics really has no identity. And to add to that, the optic readers in the recycling facilities cannot detect the carbon pigment. They cannot read black. So these are, I've seen it. These are taken off of the conveyor belt and tossed. So this is our industry standard. It started being used because black was great for warming up the soil temperature of plants. And, you know, we created a monster. So how much plastic is used in horticulture and agriculture? This is a really tough number. As a matter of fact, in 2013, much credit goes to Jim Schrader, who, between the USDA numbers and looking at the number of plants that are produced, came up with the figure of 1.66 billion pounds were used in 2013. And then in 1992, the US produced, for agricultural plastics, 52 million pounds, and 66% of that was devoted to containers. In terms of the environmental impacts, the manufacturing and disposal of plastic impacts our soil, it impacts our water, it impacts our air, and the side of the negative sides or impacts, health impacts are respiratory illnesses, cancer, problems with reproductive, neurological, and dermatological health, and others. I didn't put the whole list in, but this is indicative enough that it's unhealthy and it's a problem. So in terms of the manufacturing of the material, again, 90% comes from plastic virgin fossil feedstocks, which is digging up fossil fuels, which has negative environmental impacts. And then the greenhouse gases that are emitted during the manufacturing process. Disposal, again, on the other end, we have negative environmental impacts. We've all been hearing about the amount of plastic, that now exists in the ocean. These microplastics are created by the ocean's currents that break it up into these tiny, tiny particles that we are now learning are setting in the bottom of the ocean. Vertebrates are picking it up. It's ending up on the soil, on land. And then the leaching, if you think of a container or any plastic that's taking up to 500 years to break down, There's leaching of toxins and various chemicals into the soil. And again, with incineration, we're creating air pollutants once again. So we look at the 3 R's that we all have heard of: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reduce, absolutely. Let's reduce as much as we possibly can. Reuse, I've spoken to people and I've had great responses. People saying, well, let's share them, let's trade, let's use them at garden sales and so forth. That's great, but on a commercial scale, that's not so easy. Recycle, it's very unlikely. When we talk about the amount that I mentioned, that's just not a realistic goal at this point. In terms of alternative containers for finding different materials that we can use to reduce the amount of plastic that we're currently using, is broken up into 3 categories. The major ones are plantable, compostable, and bioplastics. And I'm sure all of you, or many of you, have heard of these types of pots or containers made out of either cow manure or wood fiber. The compostables that are designed for plant removal once they're planted, recycled paper, bamboo, and then bioplastics, which is not brand new, but a relatively new form of material that they're using for pots. And I will get into that in a couple of slides. So examples of alternative pots, this speaks for itself. I'm sure, again, many of you have heard of these products that, for the most part, I've learned are used by individuals, by consumers, not so much by large industry. So our alternative pots are biodegradable. They are broken down by the action of bacteria or other living organisms. And as I mentioned, there's plantable and compostable. However, not all biodegradable pots are compostable. There are others that do require industrial composting. And again, I will get to that in a second too. In 2015, a major paper came out evaluating, looking back at the durability, aesthetics, strength, performance, a number of variables with alternative pots. And it was done over a long period of, well, I think it was done over a 5-year period, I believe. I could be wrong, but they found, for the most part, that plants grown in wood, pulp, fabric, and the core containers did require more water. They did find that the lifespan of the pot, it helped if it matched up with the container type, matched up with the crop. So if you have lettuce, which is a short crop, short-term crop, or you have a perennial or a shrub or something like that, then that requires to be in a pot for a longer period of time. The integrity, they found that rice hull and bioplastic really were the winners for compared to the other types of containers. But I think the bottom line for this is that issues were brought up, but absolute findings were not learned. Obviously, research is something that is ongoing all the time, and the jury is out. We need to do more research and find out more about these issues, the durability, the characteristics of these containers, before we can start trying to put them on the commercial scale. So as I said, I would get back to bioplastics. There are 2 types, starch-based and polylactic acid. The starch-based is a material that can be compostable. The polylactic acid does require that it be industrially composted, which basically means that it requires a higher temperature. It needs it can't just be thrown in a pile in the back and hope that nature will take care of it. It needs particular variables in order for it to decompose over a relatively short period of time. But the benefits of bioplastics are we're using reduced fossil fuel resources. It's made from plant or other biological materials, so there's a mixture of materials happening here. There's a smaller carbon footprint in manufacturing them as opposed to plastic, obviously, and they decompose faster. Again, mostly in compostable or industrial compostable conditions, but it's better than straight petroleum. So there are four major groups of bioplastics. So the non-biodegradable, obviously, they basically need to be dealt with just like plastic does. It has a very similar chemical makeup to the regular plastic. The durable ones also need the same type of treatment for decomposition. And then we have our biodegradable and our compostable, again, with the requirement for industrial composting. The one thing that really I noticed was that bioplastic is a very, it's a market that's not going away. Companies are paying attention to it, and it's projected to keep growing. I mean, it has grown exponentially over the past few years. So the advantages, they are more durable than most of the other, the natural material pots. The pots are coated with bioplastics, increase their durability. They can be mass produced on existing plastic processing equipment, which means that what's currently there doesn't need to be all reconfigured. Made from materials that are biorenewable, and some have additional functions such as intrinsic fertilizers that are within the pots. And they have been shown to have a capacity to improve root morphology. So there definitely are pluses. The other progress we've been making is moving from petroleum to fiber, which I had mentioned. One company in particular, HC Companies, which I've been told from colleagues is really displaying their products at MANTS this year, as they should. They are producing fiber pots that are a combination of newspaper, water, plant-based resins, and some have waxy coatings, others don't, depending on what you're looking for. The large-scale outcome is a relatively new product. Remains inconclusive, but it is being sold on a commercial scale. And this company, as well as other companies, are responding to the sustainability movement. There's absolutely no question about that. Other companies are making products from recycled material. So they're trying to close that loop by using what we already have. One company in particular, Bloom, I give them credit for this, taking the plastic that is now in the oceans. So they're doing a great job of removing it, breaking it up, grinding it, and making beautiful pots with it. However, these pots are not used on a commercial scale now, at least now. They are being used for the individual consumer. The UK is really running fast and forward with alternative pots, in Europe for the most part. A couple years ago, they came out with this pot called the taupe pot. And what they decided to do was to standardize the pot. So it's polypropylene, and it can be recycled and made into post-consumer resin products. It has one color. It comes in various sizes, but the standardization translates into a much easier ability to recycle this pot than the ones that are made from all the other different types of resins. Polypropylene is not known for being terribly durable, but in this case, it's okay because they have the machinery in place. They also have, it's a smaller country, and they're able to create a recycling system that is easier for people to use. In the United States, on this grand of a scale, this may be the future, I don't know, but their recycling system is much more streamlined than ours. And then we have companies that are creating pots for specific purposes. So biodegradable pots makes these cute little pots that are mainly used for propagation. They also are involved in hydroponics and aquaponics. So, you know, not only material, but also purpose. So reuse, as I said, it's not a likely scenario, but I have spoken with growers in the US and Canada who are making attempts at reusing the pots that people use to purchase their plants. And they themselves are either going to the installations, and these are large growers, to the installations and having the pots returned, or they're having the installers return the pots, but they're seeing to it that their pots are being returned to them. And that's one option. The obvious also is reusing pots for weeding and transporting material, but we're talking about billions of pots here. We're not talking about something on a much smaller scale. So reuse, the idea is there. Again, people have said to me, oh, you know, we can reuse, and that's wonderful. We should as much as we can. But when you're dealing with 800 pots a week, it's a little tough. Recycling, as I've mentioned, the current infrastructure that we currently have in place is just not able to handle the amount of plastic that our country has, leave alone the pots. There is one company that I want to make a shout out to called East Jordan Plastics, based in Michigan. They have a program with big box stores such as Home Depot, where some of you may have noticed it, some of you may have not. You can return your pots and they are retrieved and brought to East Jordan Plastics. The one caveat to that is I'm still not sure whether that's for Home. It's impossible that it could be for Home Depot all across the country. When I've looked up the nurseries that have used East Jordan Plastics, they themselves are in Michigan. So, but I guess the lesson from this is if we can have more recycling companies doing this, that is one solution. You know, that's one piece of the puzzle that we can take into consideration and hope for. In new advances, the chemical companies are actually building properties, to do more chemical recycling. It is a way of dealing with the amount of material that we have, but it really is not an environmentally healthy way of dealing with it, again, because of emissions. So stakeholders in all of this, we have direct consumers, we have landscapers, designers, growers, nurseries, the manufacturers, and yes, the oil industry. The direct consumers want to do what's best for the environment. We all want to do what's best for the environment. But I guess I mentioned that because surveys have been done, random surveys of people who have said themselves they want to do what's best for the environment, but also that they're willing to pay more for alternative pots. And container type consistently impacted the product preferences that people had. To a certain degree, I think you had I'm trying to think of the term. I can't think of it right now. But you had a population of people that you were surveying that were probably more likely to say that they would be willing to pay more. But who knows? I mean, here I am being a cynic. I think things are turning more green as we move forward, and such opinions are more apt to spread, to be more common. So recently, the Fine Gardening magazine published in their most recent publication an article called "The Container Conundrum." I was thrilled to see this. It was more confirmation that word is getting out, that there is something wrong with the amount of plastic that we have, but in our industry and as users of garden pots, there's a real, there's a problem with the plastic pots that we're using, and the mentioning of the alternatives that are available to us, again, not on a commercial scale yet, but it's getting the word out. And I put my picture of my dog Spot here because I'm just playing at people's heartstrings. I also have kids, so I care about them too. But in terms of when we think about our yards, our properties, other people's properties, being eco-friendly, trying to do things as organically as we possibly can. And if you think about it, if you have something that's plantable or compostable, it's saving you time and money, not having to transport and collect the plastic pots. Again, I've spoken to nursery owners who say they have them piled up sky high. That's not good for them. That's not good for the environment. It's not good for anyone. And perhaps by introducing the idea of alternative pots to consumers, we can be saying, look, I'm a company that is really eco-friendly, and not only in my practices of what I do on your land, but also in the materials that I use. And this is my other dog, Matsu, I also had to put in. Again, the nurseries, they want customers to feel that they're being environmentally responsible. They're making environmentally healthy options available to them. And I can't help but think that and on the individual level, again, there is this market, just like for organics, there is this market for alternative containers, alternative pots. But on the commercial, no. But also, I was thinking, if you walk into a nursery and you see this different looking pot that sticks out from the others and has beautiful material in it, people can't help but take a look at it and wonder what it is. And from there, they learn that, hey, this is something that I can use that's better. For the growers, this has been a huge issue for them, understandably. They're looking at the production line, they're looking at how reliable is the container. Is it going to stand up from the time I stick it into the pot until it gets to the consumer? How well can it be transported? Again, plastic was a life changer, or game changer rather, not a life changer, because it could be easily transported. It didn't weigh much. Going from ceramics and metals to plastic was a huge thing for the ornamental industry. But they also want to say, hey, we're looking at the environmental benefits of this. We want to be a part of this movement to be creating greener products. And then, of course, we have the cost. And I feel that as demand increases, costs will go down. It's, demand, supply and demand. Manufacturers, they are moving towards bioplastics, using less petroleum. Companies are rolling out fiber-based products, like I mentioned, with or without fertilizers. And they also, too, want to be viewed as producing sustainable products. And again, as demand increases, prices will lower, and people have said that they want more sustainable options. The oil industry, I never thought I would see, again, Plastic Wars on Frontline, the title of sustainability in the oil industry. Not to give them a bad rap, but they're not known for thinking that way. But the green is coming. It has been, it's here, it has been here, but with changes on the way, I see it becoming even more with energy production and so forth. They do have a market in this, again, with the chemical recycling. ExxonMobil invested $8 million in scrap plastics feedstock that was launched by a chemical recycling company. If they in some way can be a part of this solution, amen. And the green industry, what can we be doing? So one thing the APLD is in the midst of is the creation of a campaign to find out how they can start getting this issue out there to the stakeholders, but amongst ourselves, of greater awareness that these numbers really do exist. These black plastic pots really are not getting recycled. Demand alternative pots. We already have materials that we're using that are composed of different plastics, like our fertilizer bags, the row covers, tags. As a matter of fact, tags, I read recently, there's changes in that sector, positive ones that are coming. So things are churning. Briefly, the horticultural industry, there was a survey done in 2017 of landscapers and landscape company owners and growers. And the bottom line to this survey was, not surprisingly, again, we're dealing on a commercial scale. They really didn't know much about alternative containers. They, when asked, were prompted with certain questions. A lot of the answers were, I don't know. I don't know. So further research is needed and education. When another survey that was done by BBC Gardeners to people asking who should be responsible to reduce plastic in gardening, naturally people went to manufacturers because they see them as being the creators of this material, 59% retailers and 41% gardeners. So we, meaning folks who work in the dirt, have, we have a place on the table for sure. So again, the new market that I'm seeing is investment in new recycling facilities. There's more green thinking coming, recycling post-consumer resins using fewer emissions. They have shown then this creation of new plastics, which I thought was phenomenal. And investors, again, are reclaiming the post-consumer resin sector. There are companies that are creating businesses based on the leftovers that we have. And with COVID this past year, I'm sure many of you, like I, had plenty of folks calling and saying, hey, I have this backyard, I want to do something with it, I really appreciate it now. The sales from in the spring were shown to have increased 12.1%. There had been a drop in the market for a period of time, but I only see it increasing as it did here. People are going to be gardening more, and people are going to have an increased awareness, even more so, of environmental issues. And one thing that really struck me was a lot of people are they're going back to the victory gardens. They want to create their own food. They want more edibles. And with that, they're going to want containers that they feel are healthier, that aren't going to be potentially leaching chemicals into their products. And again, money is being invested in green. So this is how you can contact me. Please feel free to ask me after this any questions you may have. Ask about resources, where I obtained material from. For a copy of the paper, you can go to apld.org and just click on the sustainability category, and this paper will pop up in its full text. I did mention one article, moving towards sustainability with alternative containers. I couldn't fit the entire title in, but this was the paper that discussed the differences of the various alternative containers, which had better durability, which needed more water, required more water, and so forth. And lastly, again, APLD's new campaign, we're really wanting to spread the word. This is an important topic. It's a single-use plastic that really received or has not received much attention at all. It dawned on me as I was writing this paper that this is exactly what it is. It's a single-use plastic. It's not something we use to put our food on, but again, it's too much of a material that's used once and then disposed of. So thank you so much for your attention. I think time-wise, I'm doing well. And if people have questions at this time, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marie. So several people asked you to clarify points made in the beginning. So none of the black plastic pots are recycled, correct? And that's because the optical readers can't read them? And that extends to anything black should not be recycled?
So it's not that it's just only anything black. They cannot read black. I believe that with other black material, they're not necessarily, and this isn't, so I'm not a chemical engineer, so I'm not sure how that applies across the board of the market of every plastic product that's out there. But the issue with the pots themselves is not only can the optical readers not read the black, they can't identify it. It's also coupled with the mixed resins that are how the pots are composed. So it doesn't have a single plastic that might make it even easier to recycle because it's a single type of plastic. It's like a plastic waste dump of different resins that even if perhaps the machine was able to identify the color, it would just be much more complicated to recycle.
Very good, thank you. We have comments about bioplastics being potentially a strong field of enterprise, and the largest manufacturer, PLA, NatureWorks, is in the U.S. and a subsidiary of Cargill. Excuse me. Do you have more information about how this is going to help and be part of the solution?
Specific to those groups, no. In terms of the material, it's a part of the solution in that it's using much less petroleum. It's combined, so it's the lesser of the two evils, basically. It's combined with renewable material. So it can be biodegraded because it does have the renewable material in it, and it has a small bit of plastic to provide it with durability. But it won't just be discarded. It won't just go into a landfill, we hope, because it has plastic in it. It's sort of a middle ground. And I do see, and others do see it as being a future product, close sooner than later. Sooner than later.
Well, that's good news. Can you comment or give us resources for where we could look further into the industrial composting pot solutions, where we can follow the upcoming research?
There's the, let's see, I'm just trying to think. The bioplastics industry, I'm just trying to think of organizations. The EPA certainly would. There are different groups that, let me just think for a second. If I can look that up and somehow get back to people on that. I mean, there are, so for example, HC companies, one of their products is a bioplastic. I know that they do industrial composting, but they are hard to get in touch with. I can find out. I have gone through so many papers in my brain. Right now, I can't think, other than the EPA, of a single party. The Eastern Recycling Council may very well have something. I've been in contact with those folks. There's also CalCycle, which is a group based out in California. Greenpeace may very well have information on it. But I can look into specifics if people like.
All right, thank you. Do you have information about whether the East Jordan company model is being replicated in other communities?
So we looked into that. I don't have a name on the off the top of my head. I do know there are there certainly are other agricultural recycling companies. What I found more was were companies that deal with plastic film. So they have machines that wash the plastic film and the covers and so forth. There are companies in the country that exist. Other names I can't think off the top of my head, but we need more of them. They're just, again, there's just so much of it, and I haven't done the math to figure out how many we would need to fit that need. But East Jordan Plastics may know. They may know.
All right, very good. Do you see one solution being widespread legislation that places the cost of recycling and waste management and remediation directly on the producers? This individual thinks that Maine has recently passed such a bill.
Yes, so I actually had a slide on legal issues, and I decided to delete it because it was a little bit too dense. So the, gosh, what is it called now? Consumer responsibility, EPR, extended product responsibility, is what it's known as. And Europe and Canada currently does have it in place. It's an option. However, they have found it, at least in Canada, I can't speak so much for Europe, but they have found it to have its own issues. Sometimes the money doesn't go where it needs to go for maintenance or for updating recycling facilities or for recycling efforts. it's something that there is a bill pending right now for EPR in relation to paper and plastic packaging, which is interesting because containers do fall under the category of packaging because they are products that are typically used within the same year that they're generated. So, and also Europe now has their single-use plastics ban in effect. So legally, yes, I mean, there are options. I chose not to go into it too much, but they're on the table. They're on the table. And I'm aware of the one in Maine, and I hope they're the seed that starts another option to get recycling up and moving again. But as I said, businesses are starting to, and I can't say on what scale, but recycling industries are starting to come into the U.S., whether it's from U.S. investors. People in China are creating companies here to recycle our scraps. So there's that too. It's coming from different directions, but at least it's on the table and people are aware of it.
Good to know. Where would you recommend getting contact information for Jim Schroeder?
Oh, so I spoke to him last year. He used to be at the University of Iowa. If that person wants to email me directly, I can get his information to you. It was a one-time calculation that he did for the alternative pots research that they were doing. He said he would never do it again. So he's more involved in other aspects. I want to say he's involved in the fruit trees market now. I'm not sure, but if people want to find out more about how he came up with the numbers that he did, I can get that information to them.
Okay, very good. Is there anyone that you know that's reusing the bigger, really heavy duty pots like the 7-gallon and larger? And do you know of any quick and easy way to sanitize them for reuse?
Quick and easy. I mean, I mean, to remove the pesticides, I'm not 100% sure, but good old soap and water is what comes to mind to clean them. I always then am concerned about the runoff from that, but yeah, if it means you're going to use it, clean it and I actually dig up plants from my own garden and I give them to friends using those pots, and they give them back to me, and I just keep giving more plants to people. So, but on a large scale, again, the growers that I spoke to in Canada, they are reusing them as pots to put their material into and sell. So, but I'm sure people are using them for, finding different ways of using them, I'm sure. I just don't know what they are.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have an opinion on the galvanized seed starter systems being offered by companies like Gardener's Supply?
I don't. I don't. I honestly don't know that much about it, to be frank with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's outside of the purview of this talk anyway. So, this is a comment from someone who runs a small nonprofit nursery in Maryland. They encourage their customers to bring back their pots so they can reuse them for production purposes and therefore don't have to dispose of them and be concerned about recycling. But
Excellent.
none of the wholesalers that they work with are willing to take back pots on a large
Right.
scale. Is that what you've found as well?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, wholesalers typically carry a lot more material. So you're talking about a lot more pots. I mean, the one that I go to more frequently does take back pots, but I believe at least they were a couple years ago. When I spoke with him this year, uh, it sounded more like it was pots that they had, that they already had, that they were cleaning and collecting. It doesn't surprise me because they have what they have enough of what they can deal with. And unlike the initiative out in Missouri, where people, were bringing their pots to their site as well as to satellite sites that they had created, they don't have the capacity to, collect them and process them, and they don't have the machinery either to do it. So it would be. I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I think it would be a great idea, but as is, they're having to pay for the pots that they have to have them taken off site and processed. And as he said to me, it's costing them a lot more than he anticipated it would, because these companies, and they collect them and they are cleaning them themselves, and it's still costing a lot of money because there's no money for the person who's picking them up. There's minimal value in the material that they're taking off site.
Right,
So they're not getting paid very much.
right. Um, does convincing clients to use smaller plant material help with the demand for larger pots and thus minimize the problem?
I guess. I mean, it obviously depends on the garden, on the site, if they want to do that. That's more of a garden specific issue. I think if they're not made out of black plastic, yeah, but then again, maybe you're having three times as many of those being produced because the growers. It would have to start with the growers, with the material that they're growing, that to have it set so that they have a certain supply that are used specifically, and they already do, obviously, small plugs and so forth. But on an individual basis, sure. I mean, whatever people think is helpful is wonderful. There, as I said, there are companies that, I mean, people can also go to their nurseries and say, hey, I know about these other options. Is it possible that you folks would consider selling these to us, buying from growers who may be using such containers and selling these in your store? I think that's, the consumer has a lot of power, and I think that might be another option as well. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, yes, thank you. Um, were there any solutions that were used before plastic that you perceive as maybe something should be reconsidered?
Well, a lot of bare root material, because soil is so heavy, especially wet soil, was used. And there's a lot of research ongoing regarding bare root plants, how well they do, and are they a viable, good option. I know plenty of people who use them. So back then they used to transport them almost in a slurry, probably comparable to the fiber materials that are used now for making the pots. They transported them somehow in this slurry to people, to nurseries. I honestly, I haven't seen a picture of it. Maybe they put them in burlap bags, not burlap bags, some kind of a container
Hmm.
or the thing that they could send it
Right.
in. But yes, that's because otherwise they had metal or
Mm.
they had ceramic, which are not as easy to work with.
Okay. Are are you aware of any research done for recycling um, the ag containers and specifically concerns about pesticide containers?
I am not. I'm not. Um, wow, that's a good question. Um, it's something worth looking into, but specifically, I'm not off the top of my head.
Okay. Uh, where would you recommend that designers refer the nurseries that they use to find bioplastic coated natural materials?
Well, as I said, it's an upcoming market. Um, I believe that Summit Plastics has bioplastic containers. I know that HC Companies does. These are both large-scale manufacturers. Um, I'd have to look back in my paperwork from last year because I had identified others. It's, again, it's up and coming. And sort of, the research is happening to see just how viable it is, but it certainly is the better of the two. But those are two that come to mind off the top of my head.
Thank you so much for this very informative and alarming, as well as providing some optimism for what we might do now that we are all becoming aware of this problem. So, thank you, Marie.
You're very welcome.